What Sheikh Hamdan does when nobody is watching. Every public figure has two lives. The one the world sees, curated, managed, presented through the lens of whatever image serves them best. And the one that exists when the cameras are off, the staff have gone home, the events are over, and the door closes. And suddenly it is just a person alone with their thoughts and their feelings and the version of themselves that the public version was built on top of. For most public figures, the gap between those two lives is interesting but not particularly surprising. But for Sheikh Hamdan, for Fazza, the gap is something else entirely. Because the private version of this man is so different from the composed, graceful, carefully managed public image that when you catch glimpses of it, it stops you. It makes you understand something about him that no photograph and no official statement has ever been able to convey. What he does when nobody is watching tells you more about who he actually is than everything the palace has ever chosen to show the world. The first thing you need to understand is what nobody watching actually means for a man in his position. Sheikh Hamdan is never fully unobserved. He is the crown prince of Dubai. There is always staff, always security, always someone whose job it is to be in proximity to him at all times. True solitude, the kind that ordinary people take for granted without ever thinking about how rare it actually is something Hamdan has to deliberately create, has to carve out from a life that is structurally designed to have people in it constantly. And the fact that he makes that effort, the fact that he actively seeks out the moments and the places where the watching stops, tells you something important. It tells you that what he is reaching for in those moments matters enormously to him. That whatever he does when nobody is watching is not incidental. It is essential, he writes. That is the first thing. Not for an audience, not for the official accounts, not with any thought of how the words will be received or what image they will reinforce or whether they serve the larger narrative of the crown prince as a man of culture and refinement. He writes because the feelings are there and they have to go somewhere. The poetry that the world sees is the edited version, the version that has been considered and shaped and decided upon before it gets released into the public sphere. But before that version exists, there is a raw one, written in the private hours when nobody is reading over his shoulder, and the only rule is honesty. Those poems, the unedited ones, the ones that never become public, are reportedly some of the most personal writing he has ever produced, full of the specific, named, detailed emotion that the public versions of his work sometimes hold back, full of people and moments and feelings that the official story does not acknowledge exist. He calls his children. This one is not speculated. It is something that people close to the situation have confirmed in the indirect way that information always travels when it involves people at this level. The children who are living away from Dubai, away from the palace, with the woman he loved and was not allowed to keep in his public life, he calls them. In the quiet of the late evening, when the public version of his day is officially over and the private version of his life is allowed to briefly surface, he talks to them in whatever way a father talks to children who are growing up at a distance from him. Not as the crown prince, not as anything official or managed or carefully considered for the image it projects, just as their father, carrying the specific weight of a parent who is present in love but absent in proximity, and who has had to make a kind of peace with that distance that probably never feels fully like peace at all. He goes to the desert alone, or as alone as a man in his position can ever truly be, away from the city, away from the events and the ceremonies and the constant performance of a public role that has no off switch inside the borders of Dubai. The desert has always been the place in his life where something softens, where the management of image becomes less necessary because the audience is reduced to the land and the sky and whatever version of himself feels truest when stripped of all the context that the city and the palace and the title impose. He rides there, he sits there, he looks at the kind of horizon that does not know his name and does not require anything from him, and is simply there, vast and indifferent, and completely outside the system that governs every other part of his existence. He reads poetry specifically, not the poetry of other famous poets studied in the way of a man doing research into his own craft, but the poetry of ordinary people, the kind of raw, unpolished, deeply felt writing that appears in places far from the official literary world. People who have worked around him have mentioned noticing his attention caught by words in unexpected places. A caption on a photograph, a handwritten note, a poem shared by someone with no following and no reputation and no reason to be writing, other than that the feeling demanded it. He recognizes something in that kind of writing, something that exists before the management begins, before the world gets its hands on a feeling and shapes it into something presentable. He is drawn to the thing before it becomes something, the rawness that his own public life cannot always accommodate. He thinks about the people he has lost, not in the sentimental, nostalgic way that the word lost usually implies, in the active, present, ongoing way of a man who made choices, or had choices made for him, that resulted in real people disappearing from the daily texture of his life. The woman who said no, the woman who was removed overnight, the woman who loved him first, the woman who left with his children. These are not abstractions in the hours when nobody is watching. They are specific, they are named, they are the population of a private life that the public version of his story has never fully been able to contain. He is quieter than most people imagine. The adventures, the skydiving, the endurance races, the public demonstrations of physical capability are real. They are not manufactured for the camera, but they are also, in part, a way of filling the specific kind of silence that settles in a person when the life they are living does not fully match the life they would have chosen. Movement is its own kind of answer to stillness that feels too heavy. But in the moments when the movement stops, in the late hours, in the desert, in the private time that he carves out from a life that is structurally designed to leave no room for it, the stillness comes back and he sits with it, the way people sit with things they cannot change, quietly, without performance, without an audience, without the requirement to be anything other than exactly what he is. That is what Sheikh Hamdan does when nobody is watching. He writes, he calls his children, he goes to the desert. He reads the words of strangers who are feeling the things he is not allowed to feel in public. He thinks about the people the world does not know he is still thinking about, and he sits with a silence that is heavier than anything the public version of his life has ever been asked to carry. Subscribe to this channel and hit the bell. Every week, I bring you closer to the real Sheikh Hamdan, the man behind the image, the life behind the palace walls, the truth that only surfaces when nobody is watching.